Imagine playing the piano to an audience of 10,000 people, each one of them focusing so intently on your performance that it feels like a laser beam conglomerating into a truly unbearable pressure that you just might crack under at any second. This situation was not my life, but it's how I felt every day of jazz band practice while I was living with social anxiety. If you felt tremendous pressure in everyday social situations, you're not alone. Many people deal with social anxiety on a daily basis on many different levels. Today is going to be more of a personal story relating to dealing with social anxiety through mindfulness and the lessons I've learned along the way. I'm Sam with Mindfully, and this is a story about jazz band practice. Like many people, my anxiety changed and developed as I changed and developed. It first started showing up in my schoolwork and sports, although I didn't really start dealing with social anxiety until I went away to college for the first time. I remember being confused about the strange new tightness in my stomach when I went to grab a drink from the vending machine in my dorm basement. When I got to school, I auditioned for the jazz band, which was an exercise in anxiety management in itself. Now, one thing you should know about me is that I am extremely passionate about music, and so even though I was extremely anxious about it, I pushed through because I enjoyed music so much. This is what ultimately propelled me into some of the most anxiety filled moments of my life, although I wouldn't say I regret it. So, the jazz band met 3 days a week for an hour each day. These were both my favorite and my least favorite times of the week. I loved them because I could play music with friends. I hated them because I felt like a failure, not because of my skill level, but because social anxiety had destroyed my confidence. I would sit in fear that I would be asked to play, which is crazy because I love to play. One of the strangest parts was that the practices were actually more nerve wracking for me than the performances. For me, this was because I felt more like I could be exposed during practices. But during performances, the focus was on the band as a whole, and there was a general sense of camaraderie. One of the biggest problems social anxiety caused for me, not just in jazz band but in broader life as well, was hesitancy. I would be constantly second guessing myself about what to say, when to say it, or even the right words to use. This extended into music by second guessing myself about what notes to play, how loud to play them, and when. In fact, one of the things I was told the most in jazz band was to play louder. I was playing well, but I was so unconfident that no one could hear me. I'll always remember one day of practice in particular. It was just after performance, which was my least favorite time. This was because after performance, the director would hand out new scores and the band would sight read them together. I was not good at sight reading. So we get down to business, and after a while, the director stops and goes over his section again with just my section, then with just me. Then we went back to the full band. Turns out I was making a small error which affected the band's sound in a big way. Although the problem was easily fixed and we continued on, no worries, you better believe I felt like a failure walking out of practice that day. The thing is, I'm absolutely sure that practice fell out of everyone else's mind immediately. I think this kind of situation really demonstrates how having social anxiety can make the most mundane of events seem impossibly important. Although I did eventually work on some self kindness, I still believe I may have missed out on some other opportunities because of the challenges presented by anxiety. While it might be impossible to ever completely get rid of social anxiety, we can manage it and mitigate its effects. One thing that worked for me in jazz band was to laser focus on just one thing. For example, making sure I play loud enough. If you take up your mind's attention with other things, or even just one thing, the anxious thoughts will automatically be pushed out. Another thing which really helped me was being kind to myself after every practice. Often, I would come out the door hating myself and think I did terribly, but by thinking back on just one thing I did really well that day, I was able to use gratitude as an antidote, which is an incredibly powerful to use in all of mindfulness, not just with anxiety. The last method I used to help deal with the social anxiety in jazz band was to talk to just one person after practice, just one sentence. It's easier than you might think, and it really helped me to feel a connection with the band as a whole. Instead of an outsider, I felt more included, even though I was really only connecting with a single person. So now that we've talked about when and how I struggled with anxiety and social anxiety in particular when I was in jazz band, and we've talked about how I was able to mitigate some of its effects, I would love to hear from all you guys. What method for dealing with social anxiety makes the most difference for you? Laser focus, self kindness, connecting with people on a small scale, or do you have your own tip to share with me? I'm Sam, and this has been a more personal story on Mindfully.